everybody. Look, it's me, Anne. The idea behind 12 Days of Decoration was that we're going to present a project that could be done by the littlest of hands, by the most experienced hands, and maybe by, older hands that don't work as well as they used to. So I'm going to present a different decoration to you today with a little more of that thought. Let's talk about a couple of the decorations. We've got these beautiful cards, and these are digitized so that they can be done in the embroidery machine. Now, what if you don't have an embroidery machine? Maybe you want to share this project with your grandkids. That'd be fun. So I got all highfalutin and high tech here, and I hot glued the buttons on. But if hot glue is also one of those things you don't own a glue gun, well, there's a million other glues out there. We carry a small pile of them. This is another pair. These two are temporary. The other two are quite permanent. And these, I use this one to position things when I want to stitch it by hand or even machine, but they wash out. So it doesn't really matter for your Christmas card. You just want something that's going to hold them for a good long time. So hot glue, E6000, Fabri-Tac, Gem Tac, those sorts of glues, they'll hold that for you. And as I said, this was stitched on the embroidery machine. Maybe that shows quite uniform, quite perfect. Well, what if that's not who you are? Well, I have another card, a blank card. Let's take a look at this for me and your grandkids. So if this is for you, and you want to perhaps use a pencil and then go in and hand stitch it, or if you want to use a pencil to do the outline around, you can just, I'm going to start 1/2 inch in to 1/2 inch here, and I'm just going to use my pencil. So of course, with the pencil, if you make an error, no harm, no foul. A good, clean white eraser, and it's going to be fresh as a daisy. So I'm just giving this a nice border. Perhaps just a needle and thread. Maybe you and your grandkids are going to stitch these by hand. You might just pierce through. I would suggest paper. A knot is not your friend in paper. So I'm going to take this down and I'm going to tie these two together. Give you a little hint when you want to sew on paper. There we go. So this one is a double thread with a knot in the end. This will be helpful with paper. This is what you can do. Let me start in the corner here. It's a little easier for you to see. And come up to the front here and just leave that a little loose. Maybe take your first stitch, and so you don't accidentally pull this through, you're just going to loop through that, and this will be much tidier in your paper. I'm just going to snug that down a little bit. There we go. So well hidden on the back, just looks like a single stitch on the front. And maybe I'm going to go back through that first hole that I came out of. Do a bit of a frame. And if you have some smaller fingers, you could actually take your sewing machine and pre-perf these holes and have someone stitch in and out of the holes. Use the biggest stitch on your machine and just a needle, no thread, sew around that, and then you've created a sewing card. So just a stitch you could use on paper and a good start. And when you come to the end, rather than just tying a knot here and trimming it, I would go back through my other stitch. Tie off this way so that you're not dealing with a single knot at the back of a hole. You could even take a couple stitches and then trim. And there's a start and an end to stitching on paper. So now if you think about it, this card, we could go ahead and draw the ribbons down, or hot glue, or sticky glue, some rickrack, whatever you want. These decorations were kind of created with all levels in mind. So some of them you might have to think up what would be fun for you and your kids or your grandkids, something fun that the family can do. Cards like this, of course, will have to be hand delivered or specialty mailed in a box. You know, pretty buttons, wooden buttons, fun buttons, shaped buttons, all sorts of buttons. They don't have to all be the same. They don't have to match. Look at these. Aren't they great? Just a little something, something. So when you get to that class, if you have an embroidery machine, we're going to provide files for you to stitch. If you don't have an embroidery machine, remember you can stitch on paper, fine. Or maybe you have a myriad of crayons or colored Sharpies, whatever works for you. So this hasn't been around for a long time. Some of you might remember this. I preferred a pencil line to start, but they just simply called it pen stitching. So, and seriously, pen stitching was just running along and making stitches with a pen. Very fun, very casual, not too much trauma. So if this was the bow from that other card, you could come down and you could do a bow here and the little tails if you want, a longer one, and then you could stitch your button on here or glue it, whatever makes you happy. So as you go through the 12 days of decorations, keep these things in mind. We have a digitized version of this card, but so much fun, again, with glue, markers, whatever. Don't feel you have to make them exactly like we've made them. We've had quite an assortment of ornaments. You know, this is two entirely different styles of stitching. One a little, you know, I no longer have children, cats, or dogs at home. Christmas. And this will hang on my tree with all my glass ornaments that no one's gonna send to the floor. Or maybe I have kids and grandkids and we're all about every single color you could possibly get on that tree. Whatever suits your personality. So let's talk about this. I've got a different ornament for you today. He is a snowball or a snowman head or whatever you think you want to call him. I've just simply started with some circles. Got a few more cut out here. This is a 4-inch circle. This is a 2-inch circle. Doesn't really matter, whatever you can cut. We have circle cutters. These can be cut out on your scan and cut. If you happen to own an AccuQuilt cutter, there's circle dies for that. Whatever works. If you're going to be using cotton, the nicest thing you could do for yourself for stitching these out, if you're going to do them by hand, starch them or interface them, give them a little body so that they hang nicely. These ones are actually cut out of either a white felt or a white batting or Insel Bright, something like that would give you this kind of white fuzzy texture. And I've stitched this one all in purple, so you could see where the stitches might be on the exterior to hold it together. But if you didn't want those to show, you would simply just do them in white. And got some nice big buttons. And I can tell you some things that we're used to having around here are at a premium this year and may or may not arrive in store. So I want to share with you a little secret. These big black buttons are not actually big black buttons. They are kind of bluey purple and they have a pattern in them, but not on that side. You gotta get creative. If you're not leaving your house, power to you. I'm very proud of you. But when you dig into the bottom of your button bucket and maybe you have these and you go, oh, right size, wrong color, just take a look on the back. You might find exactly what you need there. This little guy, rather than a running stitch, started a blanket stitch on him. And different eyes, different size. Again, I had the size I wanted, but perhaps not the color. Or maybe you like these kind of pearlized. But guess what? On the other side, they're a lovely plain dark button. Great for eyes. These little projects, think about them for someone in your family who has maybe no sewing experience and would like to sew a button on this year. So let's talk about this one. Kind of a smirky, goofy smile. Does it matter? It doesn't matter. This one's a stem stitch. This is just a kind of a big stab stitch in the semi sort of shape of a carrot, because you know carrots shaped buttons are hard to come by. I have some alternates, but we have these big beautiful hearts, primitive hearts. They make fabulous carrots. Take a look in your sewing stash. I have a different shape heart, also makes a sweet nose. And if you don't have just the shape you want, how about this gorgeous round one? This one has a pattern on this side. Maybe you like the pattern, and maybe you don't. The closer together you sew the eyes, the goofier they look. Just so you know. And if they aren't perfectly aligned, they kind of the more fun they'll be. Maybe they don't even have to be the same kind of button. Maybe not exactly the same size. Maybe one small and one big. Who is your snowman? You make a decision. Okay, I want to show you a couple little things about buttonhole stitch. Blanket stitch. Now, this stitch is often referred to by either blanket or buttonhole. From the training I've had, they're two entirely different stitches and should not be mentioned interchangeably, but they are. This one, simply, you're going to take a stitch to the back, and as you come up to the edge here, you'll bring that thread behind the needle. Stitch through, bring the needle up, keep that thread under the needle. And that's a simple blanket stitch. And I have to tell you that I actually prefer to sew this direction. There are directions out in the world and they would have you coming this way. Yeah, it's not my preferred direction of travel. I actually prefer this direction. So there's no right way to stitch this. There's the one that works in your hand. If you're a righty or a lefty, the most important thing is you keep the stitch behind the needle as you come, and then when you travel, keep it behind. And then you can see that that stitch lands on the edge out here. Again, if you want it to show, pick a color. If you don't want it to show, pick white or whatever color your snowmen are. I would just suggest not yellow. The buttonhole stitch, the difference is it actually has a knot around the needle. And as you tug down on that, it doesn't move at all. And maybe a more advanced stitcher might prefer that. I love a good challenge. Some people aren't in. Hand sewing is not their friend. All right, so I'm getting back to where I started here. I'm just going to kind of take a little stitch around where I started. And then I'm going to sneak to the back here to the stitch previous, and I'm going to do a little back stitch. So I'm on this side now. I'm going to go down this side and carry on. So a little bit of a back stitch up there, and then I'm going to just take my needle and push it through a little bit in between, come out to the back, cut it off, and let that bury in there. A lot of videos, a lot of books, they don't really ever show you how to start or how to finish a stitch. I love this one. The hardest decision now. That way, this way. Using 2 layers, it will hide all that stitching. Maybe I don't want to sew that button at all. Maybe I'll just glue it. Easy things you could stitch with, easy to come by. Take a look in your sewing basket. Pearl cotton. The nice thing about pearl cotton, when you're doing hand stitching, you don't have to separate it. Something else that's easy to come by and you might have in your stash is a 30 weight sewing thread. This one is specifically called coordinate. It's a much heavier, thicker thread, or you might find it listed in your basket. Might say extra strong, heavy duty. Those are okay. Dawn thought these were better. Sparkles. Sparkles all the way. And then I saw these. These came in. I was like, ooh, I could absolutely take and stitch a couple little eyes on here. Just put a little string on it, and then I'd have 3D snowballs hanging on my tree rather than little flat-faced snowmen. So these here might be a little more fun, a little easier to handle. If you're gonna stitch, sounds like, feels like paper, but it's craft tex. This could be the most fun. If you have someone in your life and, you know, stitching is even, they're not interested at all, some paper. But the craft tex, you guys, will last for eons. You can wash it, you can get it wet, it can, if it got a little dirty, you can wipe it. But honestly, we could just draw. Get those markers and crayons out. I'm going to have a slightly goofy snowman. Then I'm gonna take my needle and thread. Put a nice big loop on there. I'm gonna make a big knot because let's pretend for a minute that I don't have years of experience and I want to partake of the family craft. Some big knots. Cut that, and then I'm gonna hang it in my tree. I think it's still stinking adorable. Hopefully you enjoy our 12 days of decorating. Hopefully you take that and make it at the level that you're operating at. If you happen to have software, you can absolutely go into software, create some circles, create some stitches, and these could be completely digitized as freestanding objects. Hopefully you enjoy our 12 days of decorations. Leah and Linda and Barb have been having boatloads of fun creating those for you. Like we said from the beginning, let's be kind, be calm, be safe.